right. If you guys haven't heard about GLP-1s, weight loss drugs like Ozempic, I would say you're probably living under a rock. Many people have seen these life-changing weight loss from these drugs, but there's also a lot of people who are skeptical, and I can be included in that as, what is the longevity of this situation? What are the side effects? And once again, are we just throwing a pill at something that seems to be rooted in a deeper issue? I figured I would bring an expert on. It's the beginning of the year. I always love to do these deep dives so we can set our intentions for the year. So Dr. Alexandra Sowa is here. Hi, Dr. Sowa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So I wanted to first and foremost just give listeners, like I said, if you haven't heard of Ozempic, I mean, you even brought up to me earlier before we started the podcast about the Golden Globes last night. And
Yeah.
immediately there's a joke made about, oh, look at all the Ozempic faces. It's a huge thing happening in our
Yeah.
society. So if you haven't heard of it, it would be crazy. But if someone hasn't, can you just tell the listeners what is a GLP-1?
Yes. So my book is called The Ozempic Revolution because we've kind of come to lump all of these drugs under the name Ozempic. But
Yeah.
really, we're talking about GLP-1 drugs.
Okay.
And GLP-1 is a hormone that occurs in the body, and it has to do with hunger and satiety regulation and fat storage. And we've now figured out a way to make it and actually make it last longer than it does in our body. And it's become a very effective tool for blood sugar management, weight management, and now we're getting even more indications about how it's helping. So, GLP-1
Mm,
medications, they mimic a hormone that's naturally occurs in the body, and that
okay.
hormone acts all over our body. But really, the three big ways that it works are brain, gut, and pancreas at the level of blood sugar. So, we've had weight management tools before, and
Hmm.
we were practicing this field long before these weekly injectables came to fruition, but we've never had anything quite as effective. And that's why we're all talking about it, because for the first time ever, we have a weight management tool that's non surgical that's helping people lose incredible amounts of weight, upwards of 25% or more of their total body weight. So that's what it is.
Well, you mentioned blood sugar. Weren't these drugs created initially to help with diabetes?
Mhm. Yes. And they've actually been on the market since 2005, this type of medication, first for type 2 diabetes management. And then actually, about 10, 11 years ago, we had our first drug to market in this class for weight management. So we've had them around for a while. That's a misconception that people say, oh, they're just brand new. They're
Right,
not. But
right.
yes, the science was looking for a better answer for blood sugar management other than insulin, which has a whole host of complications. And we were able to find that. And with new iterations of the drug, they've gotten more effective. And along the way, we realized actually there is an independent weight management effect. And then now we've discovered other independent factors like management for sleep apnea and cardiovascular and kidney protection. But yes, it did start with blood sugar.
Well, you mentioned the book is called The Ozempic Revolution, and we will get to that a little bit more. But why do you think now? So, if this drug has been around forever, why are we seeing this massive
Mhm.
uptick in the use of things like Ozempic?
Well, I think it's actually very clearly linked to when this drug so as I mentioned, it's been out for a while, but with every like new iteration of it, it's
Mhm.
gotten more effective. And the first drug that we had to market for weight management, Saxenda, was a daily injectable, and its weight loss percentages were okay, about 10%. With the advent of Ozempic, which was a weekly injectable, which makes it a lot easier for people to take a one time a week shot versus a daily shot, that
Mhm.
one puts it in its new class. And secondly, it just became a lot more effective at both blood sugar management and weight management. So we were starting to see 15% total body weight. And then the newest iterations of the drug, which are two hormone agonists, so two types of hormones are in it, Manjaro or Zepbound, we see upwards of 23 to 25% total body weight loss. So that's what's happened. It's that
Yeah.
kind of with every new drug release, they've gotten better ways to give the drug and just even more efficacious. So that's what we're starting to see. Also, I will tell you, I think the creator economy, I think TikTok and
Mhm.
Instagram over the past few years have really shifted the way that people are talking about weight management and obesity. I was screaming from the rooftops for years that this is a disease. We have tools to treat it. And people would be like, look at me like I was crazy. I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't know what you're talking about. That sounds like quackery." And then when these drugs I don't know, something magical happened, like, with this availability of people to share their story, people feeling empowered to share their story, people went from being kind of very, very private about these journeys. I've
Right.
even seen this in my practice. People are like, "I don't want anyone to know I'm on these medications."
Right.
To I'm going to share it and I want everyone to know and I'm going to be so proud that I'm on these injections and I'm going to share the highs and the lows and create a whole community out of it. So I really do think that that's another big part of the cultural shift is people's willingness to share and
Mhm.
embrace that this is a disease and I'm not to blame here and I'm not going to take on the shame anymore. I'm using a tool to treat my disease and I want other people to embrace that too.
I wanna get to that disease point because we were talking a little bit about that before the podcast, and your book was very helpful to me in understanding a bigger aspect of obesity than I've ever actually even considered personally. But you just kind of mentioned something that I thought was so interesting about the sharing and all of that stuff, and I was thinking, right, well, I've seen a million fad diets and, like, the weight loss surgeries, like you mentioned, throughout my lifetime. You know,
Mhm.
remember the days of, like, Atkins and all of those
Yeah.
things. People were seeing massive weight loss from those kind of things, but they felt very temporary in a way or something that wasn't able to be maintained. So why is this different?
Because this is getting to the bottom of the biology component. And so you had spoken a little bit about it, but my book, it's a user guide to these
Mhm.
medications. So it's how can people be successful on them. But before we get to that, I explain about the biology of weight gain and why it is so hard to often lose weight on your own and why the mantra of eat less, exercise more, it's a good way to start your life and to prevent it doesn't really work once we've gotten to a place of metabolic dysfunction.
Mm.
And obesity really is a disease. Once excess weight comes on, it is very, very hard to get off. And sometimes and I talk about this actually in the book about how low carb and ketosis can be an effective way to kind of fix some of the hormones that have become dysregulated when we put on
Right.
weight. The problem is that we as a society and as a species aren't really made to just eliminate whole
Mm.
elements of our diet long term. And I believe in particular targeted diet interventions. I do. And I really do think that whole foods is the absolute best way. And sometimes I will put people on low carb and I believe in it. The problem is, and I've seen this over the course of my career, is that at year 3, maybe even sooner, people just get very tired of it.
Mhm.
And the hormones start to outweigh and like talk to you more. The hormones in your brain say,
Mm.
I'm hungry. I don't want to do this anymore. You can't do this anymore. And what's so different about these medications is that these medications are getting to the crux of the metabolic dysfunction and helping fix them.
Mhm.
And they are fixing our behaviors and our brain too. They give people the ability to take a pause and do the work that they knew that they might have needed to do, but were just unable to. And we don't need as strict a food dietary intervention. So we don't need to eliminate whole food groups. Now we need to eat very well. And that's like the second tenet of my book. It's a whole nutrition plan, but you're able to kind of just live a little bit more normally and not as strict on these medications because the medications are even more powerful than our ability to restrict that we would be able to achieve just through diet alone. And the evidence on these medications is so strong for long term sustained weight loss, far beyond what we can see with short term fixes through diet and exercise. Now, there are people who are listening to this, or people say, I know somebody. Yes, as a population, we are on a big old bell curve and there are outliers on both sides. And so, yes, 5 to 10% of people will be able to keep off weight through diet and exercise alone. But that leaves about 90 plus percent who are unable to. And this medication has become the tool to override all of the hormones that have gone haywire due to the environment we are living in.
Yeah, which is a whole 'nother conversation, obviously, especially in our country. It feels like we really aren't set up to live a healthy lifestyle
Yeah.
and that be affordable or things like that. Like, you really have to make a conscious effort. And one of the things, like, at the beginning of your book, you state obesity is a fact of biology. And it kind of hit me because, and I'm sure this may sound ignorant to some, but I've always been thin, like that is how I was born. I came into this world very long and lean. And I've been very active, and my parents both eat very healthy. So I grew up just like living that way. And so
Mhm.
I've never personally struggled with obesity. So it is hard for me to go, well, get off your couch or eat better. Like that is a mentality that I've had before. And I mean, I hate thinking that now, but it's hard for me to sometimes have empathy for that because I've never gone
Uh,
through it personally. But your book was stating it so clearly to me of like, no, there's way more to it than just you have to go exercise or you have to eat better for a lot of people. So are you seeing that a lot where there's these people who just cannot relate and so they're kind of hating on these perspectives and then the people who are struggling with it finally finding a voice for, "Hey, I've struggled and I've tried the diets and I've tried the exercise. I need something more."
yes. Thank you for sharing that because I think it's not something we want to admit, but all of
Of
us,
course.
including me as an obesity
Mhm.
medicine doctor, we all carry some element of weight bias.
Mhm.
It's inherent to how we came to be in this world, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. And when we are lean, and I actually loved that you said it came out long and lean.
Mhm.
Lean is actually the word we should be after. It's a leanness. It's not a skinniness, right? It's a
Yeah.
fit. It's a fitness.
Yeah.
You had done things in your life to hold on to that, but also probably genetically you were set up for it. And then
For sure.
environmentally and epigenetically you were set up for it. So if
For
your
sure.
parents were fit, do you know that actually a mother passes on just even by proxy of in utero children that are born to parents of obesity? If a mother has bariatric surgery in between her first few children and her second children, the children after bariatric surgery, after weight loss, will have a lower incidence of obesity growing up, even though they're
Wow.
raised in the same household with the same genes.
I believe it. I do. Yeah.
Yes. Up until the 1940s,
Mhm.
we still had people in this world who had obesity,
Mhm.
about 10%, and that's genetics. I come from one of those families, right? I just come from like a family that are hardier. They're not the long and lean. They're the short and hardy. And that's genetics. But what's happened is that something around 1980, we just started seeing this obesity rise, 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 rise. And that has to do with our environment
Mhm.
and the world around us. And some genetics could outsmart that. Right. And we're not saying that your genetics kept up in one or two generations, but you were just kind of primed and ready to be able to hold on to the leanness.
Mhm.
But so many others just could not handle the insults that came at them, right? The high fructose corn syrup that start to creep into your applesauce at 18 months is
Yes.
true, right? The fact that we aren't set up in urban environments where we get to walk a lot, right?
Mhm.
I even live in an area where my kids should be able to bike, but it's too dangerous for them to bike, and I can't let them do that into town because our town was not planned like that. And so there is a lot of sedentary behavior. We sit at a computer. The world has exploded in technology, but then that's made us just beings that just sit still.
Yes.
Even this is so fascinating, even the fact that we're temperature controlled now. We have AC and heat,
Mhm.
and we don't shiver and we don't sweat
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
has impacted our waking over the
Yeah,
past 50 years.
that makes total sense.
And so there are these subset of people, that's the majority of Americans now, whose bodies and environments and the life that they were given and the life that then they modeled for themselves has not allowed them to hold on to where our bodies should be.
Okay.
And it becomes very, very hard to lose the weight once it's come on. And I am not saying that environment and food and nutrition and lifestyle aren't important. But the problem is obesity is a disease that has a downstream effect of so many other diseases. And we have an opportunity right now with this medication to say, okay, we can treat this right now and we can prevent
Mhm.
all this other stuff's going to come over the next 40 years. And while we do this, we should take the time and the space and the money that we save from preventing all these diseases to figure out how we can undo what we've done over the past 50 years for the
Mm.
world that we've created for ourselves. And so I don't look as this medication as the magic wand that solves everything. I see it as a tool for right now to manage the disease that's in front of us and allows us to kind of have this trickle down effect in our families, our homes, our grocery stores, and our urban centers, and just everything. And we can start to unravel and get back to where we were in the 1970s. It's not that long ago. We should be able to get back there.
Completely. And I
Mhm.
do think the conversation that's encouraging to me, as well as seeing people who are directly impacted by taking things like this, are that on the bigger scale, we're starting to look at what's in our food, what are we eating, all of those things that you kind of touched on, I think are coming into the
Mhm.
conversation. They're entering the chat right now. So
Oh,
it's perfect timing for both of these things to be happening.
exactly. I do think we have to be careful that I have seen a rising contingency that we can treat the obesity by fixing our food source, our food
Mhm.
ecosystem, and our
Mhm.
environment ecosystem. That's prevention. We need to put all the energy there. Treatment is different than prevention.
Okay.
And in no other disease do we look at prevention and treatment as the same. For some
That's true.
reason, obesity, we
Yeah.
do. And so for any listeners who are like, yeah, yeah, and we could just do, no, we
Mm.
have to do both. In order to stop the disease, we have to prevent. That's changing, that's taking the chemicals out, that's improving our food system, it's improving the quality of the air. It's
Mhm.
all the things that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Treatment is different. And that's why these medications are so revolutionary.
Yeah.
And that's why it was so important for me to write this book, because we have an opportunity right now. Now, the meds aren't a magic wand. You have to do all the other work. And if you do all the other work, change the habits,
Mhm.
change your food, change your mental, the way you think about these things, exercise, well, then you're really laying the groundwork to change, to trickle down for that prevention too. So, like, you're changing the way you're doing it in your house, and your kids are going to see a different modeling behavior. You are changing the way you're exercising your community, and then it spreads. So, in the treatment, we can also prevent, but it's important that we do all the work and we don't just rely on the medication to have this magical effect, because it won't.
Yeah. I mean, I love that kind of 2 different perspective, I guess is the word I was looking for. Those 2 different things, the prevention versus the treatment, because in my head, I think I have wanted the prevention to be the treatment
Yeah.
for people, and that's I mean, and what you're saying in the book is, like, there's a lot more to it, and the science behind why that isn't just something that can be you can't use the tools of prevention if you need to treat the disease first. So this is medicine to treat the disease, and then you go into prevention, which you
Right.
talk about in the book as well. You've
Yeah.
actually created an entire method, and it's
I
called the
have.
SoWell method. It's talked about a lot in the book. That was huge for me too, because one of my biggest problems with our society is I feel like we throw a pill at everything. I'm just
Yeah.
like, nobody looks at the root causes. We want the easy fix. I mean, I've been guilty of it too, especially I suffer with sleep issues. And so I'm always like, trying not to take a pill, but I need to sleep, it's all of those things, and so I think it's the same thing here where I just don't wanna see our society throw another pill at something, and so seeing this method that you've created and that you're talking about in the book was very reassuring to me that there's more to this story. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about the SoWell method and what your
Yes.
point of it even is?
Thank you. Yes. So, over the past 10 years in my medical practice, I never felt great about just treating the disease. And
Yeah.
there's so much more to it. And even though I found this amazing specialty that allowed me to help prevent so many other diseases, I never felt good about just writing a prescription. I needed people to understand
Mhm.
why I was having them do certain things and why we were using the medication. And I needed them to fully embrace the habit changes and all of the lifestyle changes that needed to go along. So I actually created a 10-week curriculum in my medical practice. And actually, everyone has to go through this. And it worked so amazingly well. It was the whole reason I wanted to write this book. I thought no other doctors are doing it this way, because
Right.
really we're limited. Most medical practice are very limited by this. And so I distilled down what we had been teaching in our medical practice into this book. And it's the SoWell method. And there are three core tenets. We have our habit foundations, our nutritional foundations, and then our mental foundations. Habits, you've probably heard some of these things before. They're very different when you do them through the lens of a GLP-1 though. So things that might have felt like just tearing down your willpower, even stepping on the scale is one of the core habits of what I have people do. Logging your food, not recording every calorie, but just thinking about your food, thinking about your hunger scale, thinking
Mhm.
about what you're putting into your mouth, right? You're like, oh, I've heard this, Dr. Soa. This seems so basic. It's very, very different when you have this newfound willpower, for lack of a better word, with these medications. And it helps you rewire what's become so dysregulated in your brain and your habits. We kind of have to go back to the foundations. And one of the ways that I approach this is really being emotionally neutral. And it's something we talk about in the book a lot is that we're trying to take out beating oneself up,
Mhm.
feeling like we're not good enough, and just looking at this as a process and being as emotionally neutral as possible. So that I always tell people the habits, I want them to become like brushing your teeth, right? Just something you do, something you don't have to think too much about. And if you skip it, you don't like not brush your teeth the next day. You just get back
Right.
to it, right?
Right.
And then we move into how to eat. And this is always the thing that people will right up top. Everyone comes to my first visit with me or the first class and they're like, tell me how to eat. And I'll say, not so fast. Like you have to embrace the habits first. It doesn't matter. I could tell
Mm.
anybody to go on any particular diet. And if they adhered to it, they would lose weight. I mean, that's actually what the science shows. So really, it has to be about how can you do this for the long term. So then we move into
Yeah.
nutrition. I have some very, very clear tenets of how to eat when you're on a GLP-1. It's different than how our brain was programmed to kind of be calorie reduced. We actually need to really hyper focus on getting in the proper nutrition through macronutrients. So we'll go through that in the book. And then we move through what I think is the most important, but potentially the most overlooked component of significant weight loss, which is the mental piece.
Mhm.
Our brains will talk us out of success. And we see this in all parts of our life, right? We start to get imposter syndrome, either this isn't gonna
Yep.
work, I can't do it, or you make all sorts of excuses. Your brain will do these weird things, sabotage you. We really see it in weight loss.
Mm.
And I worked with so many patients over so many years on these medications. I've realized that most people, everyone thinks that they're very unique, but really we're all humans. And most people have the same experiences. So we'll talk about things like the 10-pound panic. Practically every single one of my patients on these medications will freak out at 10 pounds. And I'll be, why? Like, this isn't going to work. I've done this before. I know it's not going to work. This is a bad idea. I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm.
Say, trust the process, trust the foundations, keep going. And then we'll get to a place where a colleague or a coworker says something and they'll say, did you see that headline? You're going to die.
Right.
Right? Or
Yeah.
they'll start to think I'm taking the easy way out. Some belief that they've held on to for a long period of time will come up at some point in the future. And so working on your brain is really, really important. And
Mm.
I actually ask people to spend a lot of time there because it's a thing that will derail people in the 6 months, 12 months, 2 years out of their initial weight loss. They'll think everything's great. And actually, then their brain starts to do some funny things. And I give people cognitive new scripts. So, like,
Yeah.
have a belief and then we have to rewire it. And so, I'll give you examples of what you can do to kind of get past that. Anybody who's listening and is like, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've lost a lot of weight and no one's ever put it like that. But it's something that's universal to this process. I think it's universal to the human experience in any
100%.
age. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it rears its head, and so that's fundamentally what we teach, and I've distilled it into this book and tried to make it as easy as possible and really stepwise. I'm a big believer in like 1, 2, 3, 4, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how we learn, that's how we adapt. And so that's how we put it in the book. And we have lots of templates and worksheets and things that will help you and give you structure, even if you do just get the prescription at your doctor's office, which honestly is the way the majority of Americans are getting this right now.
Right.
And you might need to do more work than someone who comes through my clinic, but it's all here now. And so if you just follow along, you will have success.
The thing that's so fascinating to me and hearing this, and this was what I found in the book as well, is when I start to look at obesity as a disease or as a medicator, even as
Mhm.
like a way that someone has learned to survive in life, like as a survival skill for dealing with emotions or stress or anything, it's not different from anything else that we struggle with in mental health. Like, truly. I mean, everything you were just saying is exactly what I think a good therapist does in a way. It's like, even if you need an antidepressant for a moment, a good therapist is going to actually go, but let's look at what's happening. Like, yes, let's take some of these emotions down so we can process. And that's why you need the medicine maybe temporarily. But I don't want to not check out what's going on because our emotions are talking to us. And that's the same thing here. It's like
Yeah.
those narratives are so deeply ingrained and programmed, like you said. And so all of that rewiring, it's the same thing that anyone trying to make any sort of lasting change in their life actually has to do. So I just love that you're making those connections. I think that's so beautiful. And I think from a perspective like mine, where it's not something I've personally dealt with, I'm easily able to relate that to many things that I do deal with in my life. I love that you pointed out the terminal uniqueness that we all feel. I mean, I think we all are like, I'm so much more fucked up than the other person, you know? And none of us are. It's just like we really just have different ways of coping with life. And so, what is your way and how do we get in touch with that? And this is the deeper way to look at weight loss. I'm
Yes.
such a big fan. I just love that you're
Thank
doing this
you.
work. I think it's so amazing and wonderful. The book actually comes out January 7th. So when this podcast airs, it will be out. So I'll
Yes.
be able to put the link for all the listeners. And there's she's holding it up right now. It's a cute cover as well, but it's just a good guide. I told you my co-host on my Friday episodes, Chip, for any of you listeners, he's been on Ozempic for a while, but the biggest thing that I've seen for him, even emotionally, is that he's really leaned into, like, "I'm gonna start taking care of myself through this, though." Like, he's adopted a new diet. He's actually really cut back and possibly quitting drinking, like, things that he's really taking pride in his health at this point. He's working out a lot, and that to me, I've seen the biggest shift in him that I've ever seen over the course of our relationship. So, I think it's a part of this whole program, like you're talking
Yes.
about.
Yes. It's a powerful, powerful tool. And it really gives people the bandwidth, really. I think it
Yeah.
quiets their brain in many ways so that they can do the work. And, just like you were sharing, this is about health. I mean, all those things you're
Yes.
telling me, that's like the most amazing health journey. I mean, I'm sure his labs have improved and his future risk,
100%.
profiles have improved.
Yes.
Like everything he's doing day to day, you're building this up for longevity. And it's really important that we don't confuse the use of this medication on the health side and longevity for vanity and thinness,
Mhm.
because it has the potential to do that. But that's not going to make for a healthier human and a healthier
Right.
experience. It's really when we need this for very specific, use case scenarios. And it's powerful. And I love that example.
Yeah. Well, if people wanna keep up with you anywhere else besides the book, where can they find you?
So you can find me on social media at Alexandra Sowa MD. And you can find more about me and the company I've started at getsowell.com. We are a telehealth practice, but we also provide support tools for GLP-1 users. We are the go-to brand for GLP-1 users. We have a whole support system to help people, everything from the book to the toolkits to actually supplements to help minimize side effects. So I'm on a mission to help people feel their absolute best while they're on these medications so they can achieve the most amount of health benefits. So come over and connect with me on all those places.
Amazing. I'm gonna put all of that in the description of this podcast and also a link to where you guys can find the book. Highly recommend it. It's really easy to read, even like I just very quickly read through it because it's such a fast read, but it's full of information, diet plans, all of that stuff. So you guys go get the book. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kelly.